Welcome back, community, to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor and Board Director, helping other members of the C-Suite reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. We are back for another real conversation from the C-Suite with Mr. Dwayne Robertson. He is the Director of Diversity for YPO. And in our last conversation, he gave us a little bit of background about YPO being a force multiplier. I love that term. And today we're going to talk about what is diversity washing. We're going to talk about diversity fatigue and the relationship that there might be between the two. Welcome back, Dwayne. It's good to have you.
I'm glad to be back. Looking forward to having this conversation.
Well, let's jump right into it. Now, diversity washing is a fairly new term that is out there that basically says that organizations who seem to be putting forth the effort might not be. I want to share with the community just to get them grounded parts of an article from the Harvard Business Review dated December 2020, and it's entitled Getting Serious About Diversity. Really quickly, community, the idea in brief is that business leaders often make business case for diversity, claiming that hire more women or people of color results in better financial performance. There's lots of data that says that is true. The problem, though, is that there's no empirical evidence that simply diversifying the workforce, absent fundamental changes in the organizational culture, makes a company more profitable. And that's usually where I focus in my work: diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and how we can focus on change the culture behaviors versus check the box initiatives. And finally, in the idea in brief, they talk about a better approach and the fact that companies can benefit from diversity if leaders create psychologically safe workplaces. And that is something else that I'm always talking about. The challenge is, this goes back to having the leaders say, perhaps to the CHRO or the Chief Human Capital Officer or the Diversity and Inclusion Officer, you all go ahead and make it happen. You've got the blessings of the C-suite. But the problem is that unless the C-suite can personally situate themselves in the diversity, inclusion, and belonging space, the activities, the statements, the demonstrations are really performative. That goes to their main supposition that says increasing diversity does not by itself increase effectiveness. What matters is how an organization harnesses diversity and whether it's willing to reshape its power structure. And I submit that therein lies the challenge. What do you think?
I think you described the situation very succinctly and accurately. If we're talking about real change in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it goes beyond numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the key things that you also talked about was creating the safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the observations that I've been able to make with working with chief executive leaders who are also YPO members is that this safe space goes both ways. It's a safe space not only for individuals who come from marginalized groups to speak, to share their perspectives, whether it be in terms of their professional perspectives or what they think needs to be done within the organization to truly work towards being inclusive, right? Not just diverse, but also inclusive. But then it's also about creating that safe space for individuals who may not be from those majority groups,
Mm-hmm.
may not feel comfortable with the topics around diversity and inclusion, and just as importantly, may not know the first or the second thing they need to do to operate in good faith. So, as I think a little bit more about this topic, it really is really about doing the work that goes beyond numbers, and it's about creating that space to have these conversations, but then also showing that the leadership is operating in good faith, even if they don't necessarily know what to do. But I think to this point about authenticity, which we talked about previously, also plays into that, where the CEO, the senior leaders may not feel comfortable, but in communicating that
Mm-hmm.
and then saying that, we're not exactly sure how we should proceed, but
Mm-hmm.
we would love for you to be a part of this process, that's helping to create some good faith and also that space for mutual understanding and learning.
Mm-hmm. And that's where my work comes in. And this is not a plug, community, but it's just to let you know where I step in and provide that support for C-suite teams to understand how important it is that they don't just bless the work, but that they get involved and do the work. And when we have mastermind groups where we provide that psychologically safe space for leaders to take off their title and just show up as Anita or Dwayne and talk about their experiences or their lack of experience with diverse work groups and understand what that means and understand the intricacies and how they can only lead effectively if they lead with insight and credibility and experience that says, yes, I've done the work myself. No, I didn't go out and have my assistant come back and tell me what diversity washing is. We looked at this as a collective and said, wow, where do we fit into this? No, it's not just that we've been told um, that diverse organizations actually increase innovation, they increase the bottom line. But we can only get there if we're willing to look at and adjust our power structure. So when we talk about the power structure and how that's really the third part of the three-legged stool that we have here, going out for more business, innovation, but also having to change the power structure so that people feel a sense of belonging and we can move forward together, is that perhaps where now we're hearing about diversity fatigue and the fact that, unless you do it all the way, you're really kind of swimming upstream. What do you think, Dwayne?
I think that also is a very accurate statement or framing of the issue. I would say that when we're talking about changing the power structure, that's where we really get to the point of the issue, and we'll really start to see all the stakeholders that are involved in the process, where they really stand, and how really truly committed they are to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Because where you're talking about sharing power or adjusting the power dynamics, that's where people will really show you where that line in the sand is. And I think it does really speak to this idea around diversity fatigue. And also, I think as we talk about diversity fatigue, I think we need to talk about it in context, right? Because I think it's dangerous to assume that individuals who are fatigued with diversity are operating from a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
Some might be, but I think also too, if you live your life and you're not from a marginalized group, diversity or inclusion may not necessarily be something that you're aware of or is even important to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we're talking about diversity fatigue, there's different levels to it and there's different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, I'm tired of hearing about this,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be a reinforcement to the fact that this is a topic that I'm not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say also as well, one of the opportunities that I've had within YPO is really be able to engage with our members who are from different backgrounds. And I could definitely say that conversations I've had with, let's say, some of our white male members, they're like, Dwayne, they've been very honest with you. I really don't understand diversity, equity, inclusion, but particularly the last number of years, I feel like I'm the problem. And I'm like, well, you have to understand these are issues that have always been around. It's just that we're at a place in our society where these individuals who did not have a voice now have a voice and influence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily about you being the problem, but it's about you having the opportunity to realize other people's realities.
You said a couple of things that kind of triggered something for me. First of all, you said sharing power. And I want to reiterate the fact that we're talking about sharing it. We're talking about making the pie bigger so that everyone gets a slice, not taking pie from anybody, not taking power from anybody, but making sure that everyone is empowered to do their best and be their best so that the companies can go out and do what they need to do in ways that increase market share, because now you're looking at a more diverse consumer base, and ways that increase profits. And just as a reminder, regardless of the color of the person whose pocket money comes out of, it's all green. So if we can just remember that sharing power means also expanding your ability to bring more people into the fold, whether that's your company or whether that's your market share. The second thing you mentioned is the fact that your colleagues have been forthcoming in telling you lately that they feel like they're the problem. And I have those similar conversations. And that's one of the reasons why I'm always focusing on the fact that we must value every voice. And I think sometimes in this work, because we're so focused on bringing every voice to the table, that inadvertently the voice of the white male might get set aside. I have been told I feel like I'm the problem. Nobody wants to hear my perspective. everybody wants to blame me. People think I don't get it. Or if I decide to get on the diversity inclusion bus, I'm going to sit in the back because in my exuberance to sometimes want to drive the bus along the journey, people are going to think there goes the white guy taking over again. So let's talk about that for a minute. When we talk in terms of diversity fatigue or the exasperation perhaps of those who have the privilege of not having to come from a marginalized society, how do we go about addressing that?
That's an excellent question. And I think there are a number of factors that you've hinted to that play into this, right? Um, in the conversations that I've had with individuals who are passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, but may not necessarily be from a marginalized background, it's a constant reminder. You have to be willing to learn. You have to come to this with a viewpoint that you're not going to understand. And just because you've read a few books or you watch a documentary,
right,
doesn't give you a true lay of the land. And as we have this conversation, there's a phrase that I'm going to keep mentioning over and over. It's about presenting yourself and operating in good faith. Mm-hmm. When I speak to individuals who are either don't feel comfortable about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or admit that they don't know where to start, I always say to them, making mistakes will come. You as a CEO, you've made mistakes. In your role as a husband or wife, you've made mistakes. As a parent, in all the different roles that you've had in your life and you continue to have in your life, you will make mistakes. But the important thing is acknowledging when those mistakes are made, and then also showing those stakeholders that you are willing to learn and then move forward. So when we're talking about diversity fatigue, and we're talking about individuals who are not from marginalized backgrounds who want to be a part of the process, operating in good faith, keeping your ear open, and don't automatically assume that you have all the answers. Mm-hmm. But the flip side to that, I found that we also have to be very pragmatic. There's certain organizations, certain ecosystems where the person that's not from the marginalized community can probably be the most effective ally in the process. So I also say that there's a flip side to this as well in terms of how we can approach this work.
You know, you talked about recognizing the fact that we're going to make mistakes. Every day of our lives, we're learning something new. And that usually comes through trial and error, right? And I think that one of the key things for folks to remember, especially in this work, whether you're considered from the marginalized group or from a group of privilege, and by the way, I've said this before and it bears repeating right now, if we think hard enough, we can all find some type of privilege that we have. The point, in my opinion, of having privilege is how do I use that to uplift someone else? That takes me back to what you said about part of this journey is learning along the way, trial by error. And it requires us to have intellectual, moral, and personal humility. Intellectual humility to say, I don't know everything that I think I know. Moral humility to say, the assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs I'm putting on other people is just not right. I don't care how you slice it. And the personal humility to say, I'm willing to do the work, no matter how long it takes. So, wow, talking about diversity washing and diversity fatigue and how the two are related. This was a deep topic, and community, please come back for our last conversation. We're going to focus on how organizations harness diversity in ways that really require the reshaping and the restructuring of power so that it is shared. Please come back. Until next time, please remember that if you want to see this podcast or last week's conversation with Dwayne or any of my previous podcasts, go to the website, drnita.com. In the center at the top, click the link that says Keeping It Real Podcast. And in the meantime, please remember to follow, like, and share. And if anything from today has helped you reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different, please share with your network. Until next time, this is Dr. Nita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.